Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first episode of Home of Thought, Perspectives from the Unification Theological Seminary. This is a series that we are beginning to introduce UTS staff, students, and alums who have interesting projects to the public. So any kind of new and interesting ideas and research and thought that is coming out of Unification Theological Seminary, we are very excited to, have a place where people can refer back to them here on this channel. So today I am very pleased to welcome Dr. Theodore Shimmyo, UTS President Emeritus and Professor Emeritus of Theology. Dr. Shimmyo is recognized for his experience in Christian theology. He doesn't teach theology merely as a doctrine or dogma. He relates it to students' real lives, thereby encouraging them to combine belief and practice. This practical theological approach by him was already largely shaped when he was still in his country of Japan, where his reading of Augustine and Luther helped to transform his life of faith. Dr. Shimmyo's approach is also ecumenical in that he leads his students to have a precious glimpse into a universal element in each and every theological tradition, with the hopes that different traditions will be able to relate to one another in humility and appreciation, going beyond their particularities. Dr. Shimmyo served as the president of UTS from 1994 to 2000. He published many theological articles, such as Explorations in Unificationism, and his ongoing passion is to write more on theology. Dr. Shimmyo is a graduate of Unification Theological Seminary. Prior to that, he studied nuclear engineering at the University of Tokyo, and after UTS, he earned his PhD in theology at Drew University. Yes, so we are so lucky to have Dr. Shimmyo with us today. Welcome, Dr. Shimmyo. How are you?
Hi.
Welcome.
Yoshie. Thank you so much for having me here.
Oh, I'm very glad to be here. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I feel fine. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Okay, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
So today I understand that you are going to talk to us about the importance of the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a few questions for you.
Okay.
The first question is, how much does the Family Federation appreciate the Bible?
Okay, that's a very good question. And please allow me to use PowerPoint today to answer the question. To answer the question you just raised, I want to tell you what statements Father Moon, the founder of Family Federation, made on the Bible. The first one is that, according to him, biblical history is not just written literature, but the actual background behind the birth of the Unification Church. That's what he said back in 1989. And second quotation shows how serious a Bible student he was, especially when he was younger. He says, I would read the same passages in 3 languages, namely Korean, Japanese, and English, again and again. Each time I read a passage, I would underline verses and make notes in the margins until the pages of my Bibles became stained with black ink and difficult to read. And finally, he says, you may ask by what authority I'm speaking. It is the authority of the Bible and with the authority of Revelation. Let us read the Bible together. He stated that back in 1980, I think 1970s, but that passage was published in 1985. Thank you. That's my answer to your question.
Thank you. So it sounds like, yes, Father Moon really took the Bible seriously, and like you mentioned, he read it in 3 different languages to try to understand, the meaning as much as he could. And you called it, yeah, the actual background behind the birth of the Unification Church.
Hmm.
Yeah, I have a question. Yes, Father Moon talks about the authority of the Bible. What do you think he means by that, Dr. Shimmyo?
Okay. The third quotation says, shows Father Moon believed in the authority of the Bible. What does that mean? Okay, according to him, the Bible has two different aspects, two distinct aspects: content and expression. The content of the Bible is none other than the absolute and eternal truth of God. But the expression of the Bible is more relative, more temporal. So relative temporal aspect of the Bible, which can be regarded therefore as a textbook. Human beings used, their biblical writers as human beings used their words and the grammatical understanding of the languages they used. So more human. So those two different sides of the Bible exist, according to Father Moon. And he believes that the authority of the Bible lies in the very content of the Bible, namely the absolute and eternal truth of God. And actually, this understanding of the authority of the Bible is nothing new. If you go to the Reformation tradition, you will find that it has the same view of biblical authority, except fundamentalists who would believe that expression of the Bible per se is authoritative. But if you carefully study Martin Luther, John Calvin, and Karl Barth, the most famous theologian in the 20th century, Karl Barth, all these important people said the same thing about the authority of the Bible.
Is it kind of like the way the Bible refers to the Word as being both the Word and also God?
Yes, the word is basically human words. The word of the Bible, actually the word used by biblical writers who are human beings. Of course, they got inspired when they wrote down content of the revelation they received as biblical writers. And content of the revelation that they received is the absolute truth of God, of course. But when it was expressed by them, it was, expression of the Bible is more human. And it may contain some kind of mistakes even. But behind those words of expression, the truth of God, which is absolute and eternal, exists. So that kind of distinction has been made by important Protestant reformers, Reformation tradition.
I see. Throughout history, and so that's the same authority of the Bible that Father Moon is speaking of.
That's correct.
In that quote. So he's following a tradition of many people referring to the Bible having both kind of the temporal and imperfect use of human words, but behind that the great and unchanging characteristics of God.
That's correct.
Right. Wow, yeah, thank you. So do you think that it's necessary to interpret the Bible?
Yeah, actually what I said so far is the very reason why we have to interpret the Bible. Now, I mentioned that there are two different aspects of the Bible: content and expression. Content is absolute, eternal truth of God, but the expression is just like a textbook, which may be relative and temporal, because textbook was written by human beings. Although the fact is that behind this textbook, the absolute and eternal truth of God lies, probably in a hidden way. So, as I said, Father Moon read the Bible again and again in order to interpret it. What was available before him was the textbook, which is the Bible. Written expression for the Bible was available in front of him. So he had to read it again and again in order to interpret it, in order to reach the absolute and eternal truth of God, which is the very content of the Bible. So interpretation means to reach God's eternal truth, namely the content of the Bible, behind the expression, by reading the expression again and again. So reading the Bible again and again results in to and fro movement between you as a reader, as the interpreter of the Bible, and the biblical text per se. Between both you and the biblical text, there is a to and fro movement. Oh, I want to read the Bible again. Oh, my knowledge of the Bible is deepened a little bit more than before. So I want to go back to the Bible again. That's what Father Moon did exactly. So to and fro movement resulted in a circular movement. Hence, the so-called hermeneutical circle. Well, I want to let you know that everyone who is in the field of biblical studies knows what the hermeneutical circle means. Hermeneutical means interpreted, okay? Interpretive circle. So in the process of interpretation of the Bible, you as the interpreter has a real give and take action with the biblical text. And you are in the position of subject partner, and the biblical text is in the position of object partner in this give and take action. And you have your own horizon of the present, and the biblical text was written in the past, so it has its horizon for the past. Both horizons are basically open and finite, and they are to be expanded. They are to be growing as the give and take action between you as the interpreter and the biblical text deepens. And finally, fusion of those two horizons is reached. After 2 years of studying the Bible, maybe after 10 years of studying the Bible, fusion of horizons will be reached. That fusion is none other than your interpretation of the Bible. And what is interesting is that, as the Bible says, you as a human beings were created in the image of God. So behind you, there is God. Also behind the biblical text, biblical expression, behind the biblical textual expression, the truth of God exists. So in this to and fro movement between you as a human interpreter and the biblical text, God should be able to stand. So there are 4 positions here. This can be a very good foundation upon which your authentic interpretation of the Bible can be reached.
I see. So it's both, as you're kind of deep diving into the text of the Bible, you're getting more sense of the kind of literal understanding of the Bible, but also almost revelatory,
yeah.
At the same time, the practice and the repetitive motion of it is
Mhm.
unlocking God, and God is both. I am of God's image, and so God is like within me, and God is within the Bible. So it's kind of like a
That's correct.
double
Yeah.
whammy.
Yeah.
And so your interpretation of the Bible is a revelation based
Mhm.
on deep study, and
That's correct.
it's also very what's the word? It's kind of only specific to me because I'm kind of unlocking what God is telling me based on
That's correct.
my part of God.
Nice word, unlocking.
Mm-hmm.
In between lines,
Yeah, right.
you can see the hidden truths of God when you really respect the Bible.
Mm.
Your
That's
attitude of showing your respect for the Bible enhances a wonderful give and take between you and the Bible. And based upon that, between lines, the revelatory experience, your experience of,
right.
revelation of God's truth
And
can
it's
be,
totally unique
yeah,
to
yeah.
me. Yeah, wow.
Mhm.
That's powerful. That's a powerful way to
Mhm.
be, yeah, studying the Bible and looking at the Bible is kind of like a gift and a gateway to become closer to God.
Mhm.
Yeah. So then did Father Moon also interpret the Bible in this way?
Of course, without exception, Father Moon joined Luther, Calvin, and Karl Barth in his active interpretation of the Bible. Now, hermeneutical circle of Father Moon, he was an interpreter. He took the biblical text very seriously, as we have understood from his own statement, right? Over and over again, especially when he was a young student, he did that, and to and fro movement between him and biblical text. So horizon of Reverend Moon and horizon of the Bible are fused eventually, and that resulted in his interpretation of the Bible. And I really want to say here that his interpretation of the Bible constitutes the divine principle.
Mm.
And here
Mm.
there is a book called Divine Principle, Exposition of the Divine Principle. This was published in 1996, a new translation. So I want to say here that Divine Principle is none other than Father Moon's interpretation of the Bible.
Mm. So after lots and lots of study and that kind of personal revelation that we discussed earlier, then Father Moon took all of that revelation and wrote it down. And
Yeah.
I see.
So this is just like John Calvin's Institutes of Christian Religion. That's a masterpiece written by him. To understand his theology, we have to read that book written by him. In a similar way, Divine Principle of Father Moon is his interpretation of the Bible.
Wow.
And I want to add a few more words to this. There is some uniqueness, actually, of the divine principle, which means Father Moon's interpretation of the Bible is unique. First of all, the relationship, according to his interpretation of the Bible, relationship of God and humans is the relationship of love between a parent and two children. Also, both Cain and Abel are to be saved through their brotherly reconciliation of love centered on God, their parent. You know, much of traditional Christian theology tries to divide between Cain and Abel, trying to say that only Abel can go to heaven and only Abel can go to heaven and Cain is supposed to go to hell. But Reverend Moon's uniqueness is that both Cain and Abel, the children of God, originally true children of God, both are to be saved. But in order for them to be saved, they need to have reconciliation of love, centering upon God's love. And there are many other points which sound quite unique. But I would say personally, this is not very unique. This would be very similar to Jesus' spirit of Jesus. Father Moon's spirit of compassion. As you know, Jesus was a man of compassion. Father Moon's spirit of compassion for those who suffer during his childhood in his own world. After seeing a freezing beggar pass by in winter, I couldn't eat or sleep that night. I asked my mother and father to take the beggar into our room and to feed him well. He was that kind of person from his childhood. And if that kind of person reads the Bible, what kind of interpretation of the Bible will come up? You can guess.
Right.
That is the content of the divine principle. I just want to say, but to explain the content of the divine principle, which is the interpretation of the Bible on the part of Father Moon, that is beyond the scope of today's presentation. So I won't speak any longer. However, I would like to say that it was just like Jesus showed his love for the poor. As you know, Luke chapter 6, verse 20 says, according to Jesus, okay, blessed are you poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. So this kind of spirit permeates the entirety of the divine principle, which is Father Moon's interpretation of the Bible. So this is all that I want to say this time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Shimmyo. Thank you so much for joining us.
You are welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shimmyo, for sharing with us today and for explaining to us the unification perspective on the Bible and the relationship that not only I personally have with the Bible, but how that relates to the divine principle and the relationship between the divine principle and the Bible. So thank you everybody for joining us today. You will see much more of us. Unification Theological Seminary will be hosting more of these Home of Thought episodes. So stay tuned. God bless you. See you next time. Bye.